Hey guys, in today's video I bring an emotional and impactful story. Let's meet Solstice Marigold, a woman who, after a life marked by pain and abandonment, lived a near-death experience and discovered God's secret about true love, capable of transforming the world. What she saw on the other side was chilling. So, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to follow this transformative journey. Shall we go together? My name is Solstice Marigold, and I carry with me a story that changed not only my life, but my understanding of what it means to exist. I grew up as a child of the system, passing through several homes for minors in a small, cold country town. The name I was given always seemed too big for someone who felt so insignificant, so invisible in the eyes of the world. Each orphanage I passed through left its marks, some visible on the skin, others etched deeply into my soul. The last orphanage I lived in was run by Mrs. Brenner, a woman who seemed to have been carved from the same ice that covered our city during the long winters. She ran the place like she ran a maximum security prison, where every child was seen as a potential problem, never as a human being in need of love and care. His words cut like the cold wind that blew through the poorly sealed windows of the old building. In that hostile environment, I learned early on to become almost invisible. I developed the art of existing without being noticed, of breathing without making noise, of crying without shedding tears. She was a survivor, like all the other children there, each carrying their own invisible scars. For years, this was my reality, a world in shades of gray, where love was just a pretty word we read in the few books available in the orphanage's dusty library. I didn't know it then, but this whole experience of loneliness and abandonment was preparing me for something bigger. Every moment of pain, every lonely night, every silent tear had a purpose that I would only understand much later. It took me almost to die to discover the true meaning of life, to understand that even in the deepest shadows there is a light waiting to be revealed. The pain started as a whisper, a slight discomfort in my right side that I tried to ignore. At Mrs. Brenner's orphanage, showing any kind of weakness was like painting a target on your own back. His eyes, always vigilant, seemed to have the power to detect the slightest display of vulnerability. "Pain is the comfort of those who have nothing to do," she used to say, her words echoing through the cold corridors of the old building. But that pain was unlike anything I had ever felt. It started subtly, like little needles poking my right side, and grew day by day. The nights became an endless nightmare. Lying in the shared dorm, I writhed silently, biting the pillow to muffle my moans. Sleep, when it came, was superficial and populated by confused nightmares where pain took shape and voice. Food, which was already scarce and tasteless in the orphanage, became an enemy. Each bite was a battle against the nausea rising in my throat. Mrs. Brenner watched during meals, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval when I barely touched my plate. "Wasting food is a sin," she repeated, ignoring the cold sweat running down my forehead. During the day, performing routine tasks became an exercise in endurance. Cleaning the bathrooms, sweeping the hallways, organizing the library. Every move was torture. Jasper, one of the few friends I had there, noticed my suffering and tried to help me when he could, discreetly taking on some of my tasks. But even his silent help wasn't enough to ease the agony that was growing inside me. I tried to seek help in the orphanage's infirmary, but the nurse, a lady as hardened as Mrs. Brenner, just handed me a generic pain pill and told me to go back to work. "We don't have time for drama here," were his final words, closing the infirmary door in my face. At that moment, I realized I was completely alone with my pain, in a place where suffering was seen as a choice, not a reality. It was one autumn afternoon that my world fell apart. The sky was filled with heavy, dark clouds, as if the universe itself sensed what was coming. The pain, which was already constant and unbearable, suddenly turned into something monstrous. I was cleaning the main hallway of the orphanage when I felt the first wave of dizziness hit me. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, like I was on a boat in the middle of a storm. The hallway walls, with their peeling, weather-stained wallpaper, began to rotate around me. I tried to hold on to something, anything, but my hands couldn't find support. The bucket of water he was carrying fell, spilling dirty water across the freshly waxed floor. Mrs. Brenner appeared at that moment, her face contorted into an expression of disgust at the mess I had made. His words reached me distorted, as if they were coming from far away. irresponsible, lazy, yet another disappointment. I tried to explain, to say that something was very wrong, but my voice wouldn't come out. Cold sweat ran down my face and back, soaking my clothes. The pain was like a living monster inside me, tearing at my insides. I knew I needed help, but at the orphanage, screaming for help was considered a sign of unforgivable weakness. With the last strength I had left, I staggered towards the main gate. The world around me was a blur of colors and distorted sounds. I managed to get through the rusty gate, its creaks echoing in my ears like distant screams. I took a few steps along the rough sidewalk, feeling every stone beneath my bare feet. The sky above me spun like a mad kaleidoscope. It was then that I felt my body give up. My legs gave way and the cold concrete of the sidewalk met me. The last thing I saw was a sparrow flying above me, its wings cutting through the gray sky like a last message of freedom. Then came the emptiness, a deep and absolute void that seemed to have no end. At that moment, I ceased to exist as Solstice Marigold and became just pure consciousness, floating in nothingness. The void lasted for a second or an eternity. In that state, time no longer had meaning. Suddenly, I was enveloped by the most extraordinary light that ever existed. It wasn't like sunlight or light from a lamp. It was a living, conscious light that seemed to pulse with love in its purest form. Every particle of this light emanated understanding, acceptance, and a love so deep that human words are insufficient to describe it. It was as if every atom of my being was being bathed in this divine light. There was no longer a physical body. There was no pain. There was no fear. I existed as pure consciousness, floating in an infinite ocean of light that embraced me on all sides. The feeling was of finally being at home, as if my whole life up to that point had been just one long road back to this place of origin. In that state, I understood that what we call reality is only a small fraction of what actually exists. The light wasn't just around me, it was in me, through me. It was me. There was no separation between my consciousness and that divine light. For the first time in my life, I experienced absolute peace, a sense of belonging so profound that it made all the years of loneliness in the orphanage seem like a distant dream. The light had different qualities, different tones, if I can call it that. Sometimes it was golden and warm. Other times it had a silvery, crystalline shine. Each variation brought with it different sensations and understandings. It was as if every nuance of the light was teaching me something new about the nature of love and existence. The most extraordinary thing was the feeling of being completely known and loved. Every difficult moment in my life, every tear shed, every night of solitude, everything was seen and understood in that light. There was no judgment, just a deep understanding and a love that transcended anything I had ever experienced on earth. It was as if the universe itself was hugging me, telling me that I was always loved, even when I felt most alone. While floating in that ocean of light, something even more extraordinary happened. I began to receive a form of communication that completely transcended human language. There were no spoken words, no conventional images. It was a direct transmission of knowledge and understanding into my consciousness. It was as if universal love itself was communicating directly with my soul. Each message was an instant and complete understanding. I saw that all living beings are connected by invisible threads of energy and love, like an infinitely complex and beautiful cosmic web. I understood that what we call love on Earth is just a pale reflection of the true love that permeates the entire universe. It was as if each truth was planted directly into my soul, blossoming into deep, transformative understandings. The communication did not come from one specific direction, but from all directions simultaneously. It was like being at the center of a symphony of light and knowledge, where each note brought with it a new revelation. I learned that time and space are illusions created by our limited minds, and that in fact, everything exists in an eternal now. I received insights into the nature of life and death that challenged everything I thought I knew. Death, as I discovered, does not exist in the way we fear it. It's just a transition, a change of state, like water turning into steam. Our consciousness, our true essence, is eternal and indestructible. The fear of death is based on a limited understanding of who we really are. During this communication, I felt a loving presence that seemed to know every detail of my existence. It was not a being in the sense we usually think of it, but a vast, loving consciousness that encompassed everything. This presence showed me that every experience in my life, even the most painful ones, had a greater purpose in my spiritual development. It was like every piece of the puzzle of my existence finally made sense. During this extraordinary experience, I received revelations that completely transformed my understanding of reality. I saw that each person we meet on our journey, each situation we face, each moment of joy or sadness is part of a greater plan, a cosmic design of indescribable complexity and beauty. I understood that my childhood in the orphanage, which had always seemed like a cruel injustice, was actually part of a larger process of spiritual growth. Every moment of solitude, every tear shed in silence, was preparing me to understand and share a deeper love. Even Mrs. Brenner's coldness played a part in this great design. She was, without knowing it, an instrument for my development. It was revealed to me that the universe operates through perfect laws of balance and harmony. Nothing happens by chance. Every encounter, every separation, every experience is carefully orchestrated for our spiritual growth. I saw that we are all students in a great cosmic school, where each life is a unique and precious class. The most profound revelation was about the nature of forgiveness. I understood that forgiving is not just an act of kindness towards others, but a liberation for ourselves. I saw how resentment and hurt are chains that bind our soul, preventing our growth. True forgiveness comes from understanding that each person is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have at the moment. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing me to see the true nature of reality. I understood that our earthly perception is extremely limited, as if we only saw one dimension of something that has infinite dimensions. Every soul we encounter is on their own journey of discovery and evolution, even if they are not aware of it. Returning to the physical body was like diving into icy waters after floating in the heat of the sun. The transition was abrupt and intense. One moment I was pure consciousness sailing on an ocean of light and love. The next I was back in my aching body, lying on the cold concrete of the sidewalk. The physical pain returned with full intensity, but now there was something different. An inner strength I had never felt before allowed me to endure the discomfort with a new perspective. I could hear distant voices, people moving around me, someone calling an ambulance. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion, as if time had not yet completely returned to its normal rhythm. During the journey to the hospital, I was floating between two worlds. Part of me was still connected to that transcendental experience, while another part was painfully aware of the limitations of the physical body. The paramedics talked about my vital signs, about the need for urgent surgery, but their voices seemed to come from far away. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed acute appendicitis that had turned into peritonitis. They said I was very lucky to be alive, that a few more hours could have been fatal, but they couldn't see the true transformation that had taken place. As they treated my body, they were unable to realize that my soul had been reborn. The recovery days in the hospital were a period of adaptation. It was like learning to live again, but now with an expanded consciousness. Every breath, every heartbeat had a new meaning. The simple act of watching the sunrise through the hospital window became a deeply spiritual experience, a daily reminder of the miracle of existence. When I returned to the orphanage, nothing had changed externally. The building remained the same, with its peeling walls and cold corridors. Mrs. Brenner continued to run the place with her usual severity, and the other children continued their usual routines. But I had changed profoundly, and this change began to affect everything around me. I began to see beyond physical appearances, beyond superficial behaviors. Where before he saw only Mrs. Brenner's cruelty, he could now see a woman hurt by her own life experiences. His cold eyes hid a story of pain that she had never been able to fully process. It didn't justify his actions, but it allowed me to develop compassion, where before there was only resentment. The other children at the orphanage also began to notice the change in me. It wasn't something I could easily explain, but they felt it. When someone was sad or scared, I seemed to naturally know how to comfort them, what words to use, what gestures to make. It was as if the experience with light had given me a new way of understanding human suffering. My relationship with the physical world has also transformed. Daily tasks, which previously seemed like just burdensome obligations, took on a new meaning. Sweeping the floor became an act of care for the space we shared. Helping in the kitchen became an opportunity to put love into the food that would feed everyone. Each small act became a way of expressing that universal love he had experienced. The most profound transformation, however, was in my ability to forgive. Forgiveness has become not just a conscious choice, but a natural need of the soul. I understood that holding on to a grudge was like drinking poison waiting for someone else to get sick. Forgiveness became my way of keeping alive the connection with that divine light I had experienced. Little by little, I began to understand that my near-death experience had not been just for my own transformation. He had a greater purpose, to share the unconditional love he had experienced with others, not through grand gestures or preaching, but through small daily acts of compassion and understanding. Jasper was the first to approach, curious about the change he noticed in me. During our conversations in the old orphanage garden, I began to share fragments of my experience. At first, he listened with skepticism, but gradually, something in my words began to resonate in his heart. I saw his eyes fill with tears when I spoke about the universal love he had experienced. As if something inside him recognized that truth, others gradually approached. Sarah, a girl who always kept to herself, began to sit next to me during meals. Michael, known for his temper tantrums, came to me when he felt lost in the whirlwind of his emotions. It was as if I had become a small beacon of hope in a place that had been dominated by fear and sadness for so long. The most surprising thing was realizing how small gestures could have a profound impact. A sincere smile at the right moment, a word of comfort, a silent hug. Every act of love, no matter how small, created ripples of transformation that spread in ways I couldn't predict. It was as if each person touched by this love became, in turn, a channel for touching others. I discovered that my purpose was not to convert anyone to a specific belief or to convince people of the reality of my experience. It was simply being a living testimony to that unconditional love I had experienced, allowing it to flow through me to touch other lives. Today, decades after that transformative experience, I continue to discover new layers of meaning in what I experienced. Life followed its course. I left the orphanage, built my own story, faced new challenges and celebrated achievements. But those moments of communion with divine light remain like a beacon guiding my path. I learned that keeping the memory of that unconditional love alive does not mean living in a constant state of spiritual ecstasy. It's a daily work of choosing love even when it's difficult, of practicing compassion even when it would be easier to judge, of keeping faith even when the world seems plunged in darkness. Many of the children I met at the orphanage still keep in touch with me today. Jasper became a spiritual counselor, helping others find meaning in their own struggles. Sarah works with traumatized children, turning her own story of pain into a healing tool. Michael found peace through art, creating paintings that speak directly to the soul. The biggest lesson I carry is that we don't need to go through a near-death experience to know universal love. He is present in every moment, in every breath, in every encounter. It is in the smiles exchanged with strangers, in the tears shared with friends, in the sacred silence of solitude. Our task is only to remove the veils that prevent us from recognizing him. I share my story not to convince, but to remind everyone that we are much more than our fears, our pains, and our earthly limitations. We are beings of light temporarily living a human experience, and love is our true nature, our home, our final destiny. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.